is Rvision, I'm Shazana, and this is today's headlines. Preparations of forced repatriations, chaos, protests and fear among Rohingya. UNICEF welcomes Bangladesh's statement that Rohingya will not be forced to leave. Rohingya crisis besieges Suu Kyis at Singapore summit. Burma detains more than 100 refugees in boat off coast. Rohingya say prayers of thanks after repatriation halted. The forced repatriation deal announced to be taking place today left Rohingya in extreme fear, stress and chaos since last night, and protests are continuing in the refusal of returning back in the ongoing persecution in Arakan State on 15 November 2018. At around 2 p.m., a bus was seen at Unsiparang camp with the intention of returning back 30 families from among the list prepared earlier by Bangladeshi officials. Following that, Rohingya in the camps heavily demonstrated in the refusal of returning back at the hands of Burmese brutal regime. Camp-in-charge CIC officers and Bangladeshi armed forces are heavily deployed at the makeshift camp of Cox's Bazar, inciting fear among the sheltering Rohingya. Prior to that day at midnight, several Rohingya families were spotted to flee the camps in fear of repatriating to Burma. Rohingya women, children and elderly were seen in groups along with their few belongings to move out of their shelters. "We will go wherever our eyes can see," replied an elderly woman in the video when asked, "Where will they go now?" "It's better they bomb us here rather than taking back there. We will be killed there, Arakan," says another woman while fleeing from the camps. Latest report confirmed no report of Rohingya being willingly returning, which Burma Bangladesh announced to repatriate 150 on daily basis. Hundreds of thousands of Rohingya have fled Burma for Bangladesh's Cox's Bazar camps since late August 2017 amid widespread and systematic violence perpetrated against them. An investigation commissioned by the UN Human Rights Council maintained that the violence was principally committed by the country's security forces, particularly the military, and many violations amounted to the gravest crimes under international law. "We have seen widespread reports that Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh may be forcibly repatriated to Myanmar, reports that UNICEF views with the utmost concern," UNICEF spokesperson Christophe Boulerac told journalists in Geneva. UNICEF's comments reflect the views of Rohingya refugees sheltering in Cox's Bazar, where conditions are preferable to the perceived risk of returning to Myanmar, Mr. Boulerac said. Unofficial polls conducted by our UNICEF colleagues in the camps have all reached the same conclusion. The overwhelming majority of refugees are unwilling to be repatriated unless their safety can be guaranteed, he explained. In a regular press briefing, Mr. Boulerac insisted that Rohingya communities inside Burma are still extremely vulnerable before appealing for unhindered and simplified humanitarian access. In addition to the incredibly worrying situation inside Myanmar, UNICEF remains seriously concerned about refugee children inside Bangladesh, warning of a lost generation. In a bid to help youngsters in Cox's Bazar, the UN agency is continuing to roll out a series of educational initiatives for children of all ages, including providing a network of learning centers and child-friendly spaces, CFFs. There are now more than 1,100 learning centers run by UNICEF and its partners in the camps, which reach 124,000 children with education, Mr. Boulerac said. Diplomatic niceties have been in short supply for Aung San Suu Kyi at a summit in Singapore, where the one-time rights champion has been publicly chastised over her handling of the Rohingya crisis, compounding a dismal week for Burma's de facto leader. Suu Kyi has refused to speak up for the Rohingya, a stateless, persecuted Muslim minority driven by violence in Bangladesh in huge numbers. Her reticence on the issue has cut her adrift from the global rights community, including the United Nations, whose investigators say last year's Burmese army campaign amounted to genocide. Many of the honors previously showered upon Suu Kyi for her stoic, peaceful resistance during years of house arrest by Burma's junta have been rescinded. On Monday, Amnesty International, whose campaign to free Suu Kyi galvanized global recognition of her democracy struggle, stripped her of its highest honor over her indifference to the atrocities against the Rohingya. One day later, at a regional summit in Singapore, criticism replaced at the garlands she has received on the global stage since steering her party into government in 2016. Suu Kyi was castigated by Malaysia's Premier Mahathir Mohamad at the Association of Southeast Asian Nations ASEAN Meet, a forum better known for platitudes than admonishments. The diplomatic siege deepened on Wednesday when US Vice President Mike Pence told her the violence and persecution against the Rohingya was without excuse. In reply, Suu Kyi, who appeared wrong-footed by the directness of the public critique, retreated behind her usual position: the Rohingya crisis is an internal Burma affair. In a way, we can say we understand our country better than any other country does, she said. The Nobel laureate insists impartial domestic probes will establish any evidence of army abuses. But Rohingya refugees say Myanmar will never provide real justice. More than 100 fleeing Rohingya Muslim refugees have been detained on a boat off the coast of Burma, officials said. The boat was bound for Malaysia when it was stopped by authorities early on Friday morning around 20 miles south of Yangon, Burma's largest city, an immigration officer said. The group had boarded the vessel from internal displacement camps outside Arkyab, the capital of Arakan State, Chote said. Fears have now been raised of a fresh wave of dangerous voyages being undertaken by those fleeing the country, similar to those seen after a crackdown on people smugglers in 2015. There were 50 men, 31 women, and 25 children among the refugees intercepted at sea, said Mya Mo, a politician for Aung San Suu Kyi's ruling National League for Democracy Party. She posted pictures on Facebook of a rickety boat cramped people. The boat resembled those typically used by Rohingya to escape the apartheid-like conditions in Arakan, where they face persecution and are denied free movement, education, and healthcare. For years, Rohingya on both sides of the border have boarded boats organized by smugglers in the dry months between November and March, when the sea is calm. But the perilous journey to Thailand and Malaysia, often undertaken in overcrowded vessels, has cost many lives. Thailand cracked down on the trade after discovering a series of mass graves in 2015, leading to a crisis when smugglers abandoned their human cargo and left boats adrift in the Andaman Sea. Rohingya Muslims living in Bangladeshi refugee camps gave prayers of thanks on Friday after threatened repatriations back to Burma were halted. None of the 800,000 Rohingya who fled Burma after a military crackdown in August last year volunteered for the returns, which were scheduled to start Thursday. Bangladesh has not said when or if a new attempt will be made to persuade the Rohingya to leave the refugee camps on the Burma border, now filled with about 1 million people. The failure of repatriations dominated Friday prayers in camp mosques. In their prayer, they especially thanked Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, Bangladesh government and authorities, local international media and NGOs to support the Rohingya at this vulnerable time. For decades, the Rohingya have been denied citizenship and other rights by Burma and are accused baselessly as Bengali. Many say they are too scared to return because of the deadly crackdown in the Buddhist-dominated state, which the United Nations has said needs a genocide investigation. Bangladesh and Burma agreed to start repatriations last year, and a preliminary list of 2,260 refugees who could go back was prepared. The UN and aid groups said only volunteers should go back, and none came forward. Burma blamed Bangladesh for the delay, saying it made weak preparations for the returns. Bangladeshi authorities have said no Rohingya would be forced to return. Thank you for watching Rvision News. To know more about Rohingya news, visit our website rvisiontv.com or follow us on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook.